In this video project, we would like to look at the damsel in distress, also known as Save the Princess trope in Japanese video games, and how it enforces sexist stereotypes of women. We'll also touch on the general depiction of women in video games, how gender roles are enforced, and specifically, how the damsel in distress trope portrays and objectifies women, as well as the contemporary situation and how it has impacted the worldwide gaming industry.
To introduce the topic, we will briefly describe the history of video games in Japan. Looking at the video game industry, Japan and the US are the dominating countries both in producing software and hardware. Nowadays, 1 in 5 global consumers own a console, such as Sony's PlayStation, Nintendo consoles, or Microsoft's Xbox. Coin arcade games launched the popularity of video games in Japan, the most well-known being Space Invaders in 1978, being popular enough to cause a nationwide coin shortage. Later on, as Nintendo started producing hardware such as the NES, Japan established the standard of the home video game industry. Additionally, they created games such as Donkey Kong and Super Mario, introducing the new video game genre called platform game, which first introduced important game mechanics like jumping and side-scrolling. But most importantly, they introduced an established plot, together with the damsel in distress trope. So damsel in distress is a common trope in entertainment mediums dating back to old folktales of knights saving the princess from a scary dragon where the hero must rescue a loved one or a love interest, most of the time a woman, from the antagonist. Even though these damsel in distress characters are very important to the story and often the game premise could not exist without them, they are introduced mainly to give the hero an objective to complete. Nintendo has a long history of using this trope in their video games, the first example being from Super Mario Bros. Bowser, the main antagonist, kidnaps Princess Peach and hides her in one of his 8 dungeons, presenting Mario and Luigi with the objective to save her. This narrative repeats in the next games as well, with variations to the plot. The next example is The Legend of Zelda, where the protagonist Link has to save Princess Zelda after she gets kidnapped by the warlock named Ganon, but instead of having to visit 8 castles, Link has to collect the 8 pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom. After collecting these pieces, he defeats Ganon and rescues Zelda. Disregarding the strange pattern of the number 8, once the hero accomplishes the Save the Princess plot point in both of these games, he is dubbed as the savior of the kingdom.
Next, we will talk about sexism and gender roles in video games industry and analyze the damsel in distress trope accordingly. To briefly showcase the extent of sexism in video games, we can take a look at recent research done by Ronick et al. In this research about dialogue in video games, which consisted of 50 RPGs and more than 6 million words, they found out that roughly 2/3 of the in-game dialogue is done by men, and that women have a much narrower range of roles. So once again, back to our original cause. The damsel in distress trope is one of the most recognizable storytelling devices in Japanese video games, where females become fragile objects and men their almighty savior. Furthermore, contrasting to the simplistic women depiction, men can be both muscular, smart, or mostly both at the same time, similarly to the Wenwu idea. This trope constructs a binary view of gender roles deeply rooted in patriarchal norms. Men are cast as active, decisive, and powerful, while women are portrayed as passive, dependent, and powerless. Interestingly, these roles align with the Neo-Confucian gender ideas about women the body and men the brain. From a sociological perspective, such depictions have real-world implications. Repeated exposure to narratives that emphasize male proactivity and female passivity can shape perceptions of gender behavior, especially among younger audiences, which are common around video games.
The damsel in distress character is portrayed in an objectified way. Apart from marginalized narrative roles, female characters in Japanese video games are often objectified through their visual design. Hypersexualized depictions, such as exaggerated body proportions, revealing outfits, and provocative animations, reduce female characters to objects of male desire. This phenomenon aligns with Laura Mulvey's concept of the male gaze, which argues that women in visual media are often positioned as objects created for male spectatorship, constructing an environment of voluptuous, unrealistic personages without much inner depth. The difference in design becomes clearer when comparing male and female characters. Protagonists like Link from Legend of Zelda and Cloud from Final Fantasy VII are designed for function and strength, while their female counterparts, Zelda and especially Tifa, have impractical clothes that embellish their curves. Like Zelda did not even have pants until 2017. This objectification serves to reinforce aforementioned gender hierarchies, suggesting that just like in Neo-Confucianism, women's primary value lies in their physical appearance. Ultimately, the over-sexualization of women in video games limits how they can be perceived, trapping them in roles that prioritize their bodies over their humanity. This not only limits women's representation, but also reinforces harmful stereotypes about their roles in society and culture.
In recent times, video games have acquired more elaborate plots, but the trope is still involved even if the player isn't explicitly saving a princess. In games such as Resident Evil 4, the main character Leon is on a quest to save the US president's daughter who has been kidnapped by a cult. The trope is also still seen in recent Zelda games such as Breath of the Wild, where Zelda is powerful enough to keep the looming dangers away from the Kingdom of Hyrule, but cannot endure it for much longer without Link's involvement. Recently, we can see positive trends taking place. A new game in the LOZ franchise titled Echoes of Wisdom will feature Zelda as the player character instead of Link. She has been a playable character in previous releases, however, this is the first time she is the main and only playable character in the game. Interestingly, recently parent-saving child games have also surfaced, but that could be a whole separate video.
In conclusion, the damsel in distress trope in Japanese video games reflects and reinforces patriarchal gender roles. Though less easier to see today, the trope still shapes character design and storytelling, influencing perceptions of gender. However, progress is evident with the titles like Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. A shift towards inclusive and diverse narratives can challenge outdated stereotypes and redefine gender roles in gaming.